Hello and welcome to the Azure Stack HCI show. Hello, Manfred. How are you doing today?
Hey Sven, hello.
I think you're fine, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fine. I'm looking forward to our show today.
Yeah, you had a lot of events the last
Yes,
days about Azure Stack HCI. So you're on tour in Germany with some partners. So
yes.
how's your feedback about Azure Stack HCI and what our partners and customers think?
Yeah, a lot of interest about Azure Stack HCI. And the interesting thing is we already had this topic several times here in the Azure Stack HCI show. What I'm always explaining as advantage of Azure Stack HCI is that we are using the same resource model we have in Azure. So I'm always showing that I can use my experience I have from Azure to manage services on Azure Stack HCI. And this is where I'm really getting great feedback from the attendees in this shows and tours we are actually doing in Germany, that they are absolutely amazed about what's possible here. And most of them did not know about this before. So they realized in these presentations, this is now really true. And this is exactly what the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant says about hybrid solutions in the market, that Microsoft is not only at the leading part, but they are also able to deliver this technology. Yeah,
Okay.
this makes a lot of fun that it really works. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really. So a lot of customers at the moment are asking about Hyper-V. That's
Yeah.
super interesting to see that the situation with Broadcom and VMware is changing a lot of in the market. And so, yeah, this was a little bit unexpected. So we got much more attention about Hyper-V, Windows Server itself. Next version is coming this autumn, so super curious about all the new
Yeah.
things coming. Then we'll have Microsoft Build next month, and
Yeah.
I'm curious about all the announcement that might come, because a lot of things has been announced so far about Windows Server, Hyper-V, Azure Stack HCI. But people like Jeff Woolsey also always say and write, not everything has been announced so far. So maybe
Yeah.
we will hear some new things. And yeah, Azure Stack HCI is a lot of requests I get to present this solution to our customers. So yeah, interesting days. So
An
that,
interesting thing about Hyper-V, what you mentioned, there's
yeah,
really a lot on traction, but many customers are afraid because of this situation in the virtualization market. And in the last week, I got several questions if Hyper-V will be available in the next version. So there are customers that are afraid that something could change here. And there, the good thing is that we can absolutely be sure that Hyper-V is in Windows Server today and in the next version and also in the future. And Hyper-V is the hypervisor in Azure Stack HCI, so it will also be there. So Microsoft did not talk so much about Hyper-V. When I think about Azure Stack HCI, the first versions, nobody talked about Hyper-V. It was in there. Hyper-V is the hypervisor, but we talked about Azure Stack HCI, hybrid services, Arc, and so on. And it seems that customers got the impression, oh, they are not talking about Hyper-V directly, so maybe something is wrong here. But we can be sure Hyper-V is the hypervisor from Microsoft. It's highly scalable, and it is in Azure Stack HCI, and it's in Windows Server today and also in the next versions.
yeah, that's an interesting point. So we are doing partner trainings for 11 years now, and we know that it takes 10, 20 times until the people really realize what we are teaching. But all the rumors, they yeah, remember immediately. Yeah? So it's easier for our partners and customers to get in contact with the rumors instead of the facts, it looks like. So that's why we're continuing doing these kind of shows to share facts, insights, and to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, today is the perfect day to raise them via the chat window, because today we are talking about Azure Stack HCI news, and we want to spend some time to answer questions, and maybe you have some, then yeah, please don't hesitate. So what I want to show about Hyper-V on my Azure Stack HCI website, you can find the segment Windows Server. And on Windows Server, there is a link to an article from Jeff Woolsey about the future of Windows Server. Hyper-V is bright. So when I click on that website, you can see a very good blog from Jeff where he describes how important it is. So Hyper-V is, and in what products it's included. So it's an important part of Azure. So yesterday I had a call with a customer. This customer has hosting services, and they wonder if Hyper-V is able to do all the things they need from a hypervisor to run their data center. And I said, well, Hyper-V is the foundation of Azure. So if Hyper-V is able to run Azure, hopefully it's able to run your data center as well. And the customer said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. They were not aware of that. So there are a lot of very interesting information about Hyper-V, Hyper-V in Windows Server, Hyper-V in the next version of Windows Server. So if you want to know more about Hyper-V, you can find the link in my website. The URL I will show a little bit later. So it's svenlangenfeld-techtalk.com, but I have one slider a little bit later. So let's talk about some news. On the section news on my website, you can find a blog post regarding Azure Virtual Desktop for Azure Stack HCI. There has been some news some days ago. So last time in the Azure Stack HCI show, we had Marcel Meurer as a guest speaker, and he presented Hydra, a solution that builds on top of Azure Virtual Desktop to manage Azure Virtual Desktop in Azure and on Azure Stack HCI, and closing some feature gaps. And one of these feature gaps in the past was autoscale. And now autoscale comes to native Azure management for Azure Stack HCI and Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure. So is there anything you want to show on that new feature?
Yeah.
Anything you want to share from the technical perspective?
Yeah,
So
we
this
can have a
morning
short.
you had this in the hybrid show, correct?
Yes. I had this in the hybrid show, and when we compare the solution in Azure with Hydra, then you have the typical situation. If there's a solution that already exists for a while, that is it has a nice surface and is already optimized, this is Hydra, and the new thing in Azure that is very basic from the handling, but it works, and I think it's interesting to have a short look at it. So I will switch to my screen where I have opened the Azure portal so that we can get an impression. The important thing about this is that Azure Stack HCI Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI has additional costs for the virtual CPUs of the target desktop machines. So it's helpful to ensure that only the virtual machines I really need are up and running. And there we have the situation that for Azure Stack HCI, when I switch to one of my Azure Stack HCI clusters, here for example this one, we have the Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. So we had this in one of the shows where we showcased the steps for Azure Virtual Desktop deployment on Azure Stack HCI. So this works and nothing has changed here. But in the past, we didn't have the option to ensure that additional VMs are automatically started and not needed VMs are shut down without additional software solutions. Hydra is one of these solutions that automate this. And what's now new that we can use in Azure Virtual Desktop, the scaling plans for virtual machines for Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. So when I select one of my host pools, so for example, here the host pool 21, this one here, I can use this host pool with 3 virtual machines.
Mm-hmm.
to create a scaling plan. So in the scaling plan is more or less an automation part for this whole section. So when I this is the assignment. When I create a scaling plan, I will go back to this here. Here are the scaling plans. When I create a scaling plan, the scaling plan has a resource group. This is what we already know, resource group, and it has a name. It's an scaling plan 01. It has a region. It has a friendly name. I will use the same one here. And I can decide if it's a pooled or a personal desktop. And now we can create schedules. And this is the interesting part, because with the schedules, we can define the ramp up. So when the virtual machines should be prepared to be ready when the user starts, so that we don't have the experience that a user wants to connect and then the virtual machine has to start. So the virtual machine will be prepared before we expect the users. Then we have the peak hours, where we can specify the time when we expect that most users are online. We have the ramp down. This is the time where we expect that the users more and more drop, so they go home, usually Germany after 5 p.m., for example. And we have the off-peak hours. This is, for example, in the night, when we still need the ability to provide Azure Virtual Desktop to users, but we don't expect so much load. And in each of these categories, we can specify the time, the load balancing. So we can define if it first goes, if it first does additional machines, or if it first puts additional sessions on the existing machines. And we can specify the percentage of hosts that will be prepared or that will be offboarded, and the threshold when we say, okay, if it reaches 60%, then we need additional hosts, for example. So if we would configure this completely, we would need too much time. In the hybrid show, you mentioned it, we did this today. So we had a full 1 hour live demo for configuring it. But I think you can imagine how it works. So in each of these sections, we can specify the time, the load balancing algorithm, and the percentage or the threshold for this for this preparation. And so we can automate this virtual machine placement. And we have the advantage, for example, when we go to the off-peak hours, that only a small part of the virtual machines are on and running. And so we have the costs for Azure Virtual Desktops maybe only for 10% of our complete number of virtual CPUs we have configured here.
Cool. You said this is a new user interface. Isn't this the same as for AVD on Azure? Or
This is, yeah. This is the same interface. This is the cool thing. All these interfaces are identical, but they have the addition to configure it on Azure Stack HCI. So, for example, when we look at the deployment for Azure Virtual Desktop, then we have one section in the deployment where we are asked, should the virtual machine be deployed on Azure or on Azure Stack HCI? And with the scaling plans, we have the same situation. The scaling plan is absolutely identical for Azure and for Azure Stack HCI. And now the great thing is we can also add the scaling plan to an Azure Virtual Desktop deployment on Azure Stack HCI. And this is what's new here.
Oh, that's really cool. So thank you. So the next news on my website is brand new. It's 2 days ago, I guess, or yesterday.
Yep.
Sneak peek at the Hannover Messe, Germany, about a new Azure Edge infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
This is a blog post from Cosmos Darwin. And he shared this picture where you can see this roboter doing cool roboter things. But the interesting thing is that below the roboter arm, there are these 3 devices, some cables, and he's raising the question, what are these? And he says this is a sneak peek, so something we do not really talk about at the moment, but it's maybe a kind of project or maybe something that's coming soon. We do not know. But what we know is that there is hardware from Lenovo. These are edge devices optimized for low footprint. And here you can see in this graph that it's an Microsoft Azure managed solution. So we will see what solution it will be. Will it be Azure Stack Edge, HCI, something completely new? So I'm super curious about that. It's Azure Kubernetes, and all these devices are running Azure Linux. So have you heard about that so far, Manfred? Or is this brand new for
Interesting
you?
thing is, I've
You are
seen
an MVP. You know things much earlier than others.
The interesting thing is, I've seen exactly this device yesterday. I've been for the day before yesterday. I've been in for an Azure Stack HCI event in the Lenovo EBC in Stuttgart. And they had exactly this device. And if you scroll down to the next picture, there we can see the configuration, and maybe you cannot imagine the size of this device. It's really very small. It's like a typical book from the size, and it's passive cooled, so there are no fans in it. And the interesting thing is, the whole infrastructure is inside this device. So in the EBC in Lenovo, they had a Wi-Fi antenna on it, so you could connect wireless. You have this network interface ports, and it's really very small. It's very light. It looks like a typical industrial device, and this fits to the picture you had with the robot arm, where the handling of the robot arm for sure will be handled by these devices. And here you can see in the text that it says there are elements of Azure Stack HCI and Windows IoT on it. So it's a little bit not completely clear in the article. So as you said, it seems like a, let's say, special project, but it has something to do with Azure Stack HCI. And my expectation is that I will be able to see these devices in my portal. And there we are back to the advantage I mentioned at the beginning of our show of Azure Stack HCI and all these hybrid services, that I can use the management of the Azure portal to deploy services, to configure services, and it doesn't matter if I have one or thousands of these devices.
Yeah, very interesting. So we all know that Azure Stack HCI is super scalable from one node to 16 nodes, and every single node can be minimized. I think 2 SSDs at the moment are the minimum configuration. So for most of the edge devices, this is absolutely perfect, but for some, it's too big, still too big. So curious about what's coming for Azure Stack HCI or the Azure Stack ecosystem in the next couple of weeks or months. So more curious about the build event. I think Microsoft Build, there can be a lot of cool announcements.
Yeah, especially the memory and CPU requirements are an interesting point, because as we have seen in this article, this device has an i5 CPU and 16 gigabytes of memory. This is below the Azure Stack HCI requirements we have today, and I assume this is the reason why we can read in this article that there are parts of Azure Stack HCI on this device. So this must be something special, yeah.
Yeah, and it runs Windows IoT and not Windows Server. And it's Linux-based, so very interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. So
another cool thing is the public preview of Azure Arc Site Manager. So who needs Azure Arc Site Manager? I think you need it.
I can use it, yeah. So
you have so many sites.
The interesting thing is Site Manager is a solution where I can bring structure into my Azure Arc devices. Because when you start with Azure Arc, you will realize that they are all connected to Azure, these devices, and you see a list of your devices. And if you have 10 of them, this is fine. If you have a few hundreds of them, you will realize maybe it could be helpful to bring some structure into this. And you have elements like resource groups, but maybe the resource groups don't fit to your geographical sites. The resource groups are usually used more with a technical aspect. And with the site manager, you can create a structure. Typical, we will do it on geographic placement. So for me, for example, a site Würzburg and a site Rothenburg, but it could also be a structure of services where I say, okay, this is my Kubernetes area and this is my virtual machine area. So it can be used, the site manager, to have an additional structure for the Arc-enabled devices.
Okay, perfect.
And for sure, it's for free. We don't have to install anything. So it's more or less that I go to the Azure portal and I define the structure, and then I map Arc-enabled devices to the structure. Yeah.
Okay. The next thing is about critical updates. So on the top of my news page, you can see the official Microsoft Azure Stack blog. So when I go to that Azure Stack blog, then you can find all the things that are posted by the engineering team, like the sneak peek and so on. And one of the things is the apply critical update for Azure Stack HCI. So why is this something that landed on the news blog? Is it something that's unusual that you have to update your Azure Stack HCI VMs?
It should not happen, let's say, because this could be automated. So I was really surprised about this because if a customer would have had this information before, then he would have said, why? We have Windows Update, we have Azure Update Management. Azure Update Management is for free in Azure. The virtual machines are Arc enabled. So the reason why we need this update is that in Azure Stack HCI, we have the situation that the virtual machines behave like they would run in Azure. So this is great because we have a lot of advantages, extended security updates, hot patching already today. So with Windows Server 2025, we will have it in different other areas with additional costs, but we have today hot patching on Azure Stack HCI and so on. And the update was more or less required to ensure that the virtual machines still think that they are running in Azure, even if they are running on my Azure Stack HCI cluster on premises. So I expect that this will not be required in the future or always in the future. This is more or less a situation we have actually that we have to ensure to do this update manually. I'm pretty sure that this will be done fully automated without any needed notification to us. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. The next topic is about logical networks and Azure Port HCI, setting the stage for software-defined networking. So what is the interesting thing about that post? So here you can link to the post, and here you can see a video that's embedded in the post, which describes what this feature is. Could you summarize in 1-2 minutes?
Yeah, maybe it's helpful to have a short look at the Azure portal from my side. I've opened it and I will switch to an Azure Stack HCI cluster. Let's take this one here. And when I go to the Azure Stack HCI cluster, I have the resources on the left-hand side. There are logical networks. And when I go to logical networks, then I have actually one logical network here, but I can create additional logical networks. And a logical network does not exist on Hyper-V. So if I'm using Hyper-V on Windows Server, I have my physical network interfaces, I have my virtual switches, and there I have my virtual machines connected. So maybe we can visualize it here like this. In Hyper-V, we have the VM. The VM is connected to the virtual switch, and this is connected to the physical NIC. So this is how we know it. The virtual switch can be a standard switch, or it can be a switch embedded teaming switch. Now let's say Hyper-V in Windows Server. So when we use Hyper-V in Azure Stack HCI, then it's different, because in Hyper-V in Azure Stack HCI, we have the situation, we have the VM. The VM, we showcase this here, is connected, it's created via the Azure portal. So we have the VM. The VM is connected to the logical network, and the logical network is connected to the virtual switch, and the virtual switch is connected to the physical NIC. So here we have the physical NIC. So we have this additional element of the logical networks, and many logical networks can be connected to one virtual switch. So we have the advantage to bring more structure into our network infrastructure, because now we have a logical layer that is completely independent from the physical layer. The physical NIC, there we have cables and switches, so we cannot easily change this here. The virtual switches are created when we create the cluster. So it is possible to create additional virtual switches, but this can have impact on my infrastructure, and it can have a negative impact on the functionality on my cluster if I do something wrong here. The logical network is a complete virtual logical layer in Azure that is put between the virtual machine and the virtual switch. And if I create a logical network or I delete a logical network, I don't change anything on the physical infrastructure on premises. So it gives us more flexibility, more structure, and it's very helpful in a higher scale environments. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Again, what learned? We say in Germany, again, what learned.
Yes.
Perfect. So the next topic I would like to talk about is in the section hardware service.
Yeah.
So in hardware services, you can find relevant contacts for most of the OEMs and some of their individual offerings. And yesterday there was an internal email. That internal email said, Lenovo now has Premier Solutions, and they linked to that blog from Lenovo. I will do it here. We can see it. And yeah, before our session, I said to Manfred, have you realized that Lenovo has a Premier Solution? And Manfred said, no, I do not, because it's not in the catalog. So what does this mean, Manfred? So from your perspective, it's not a Premier Solution at the moment because it's not in the catalog, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm always telling the partners and customers that the catalog is the reference. And as you mentioned that Lenovo now has a Premier Solution, for sure my first step was to go to the catalog and to have a look if it's there. So my expectation is that it will be there in the next weeks or days. And it has to be there, because as long as it's not listed in the catalog, it is not a Premier solution or integrated system and whatever. We have 3 categories: validated nodes, integrated systems, and Premier solutions. And for sure, Lenovo has validated nodes and integrated systems. And I'm looking forward if Lenovo has Premier solutions, because the story behind the Premier solutions is great, but it's important to be in the catalog. And from my point of view, if this is a thing between Microsoft and Lenovo, it's not perfect that the blog post is out before the catalog is updated, or maybe it takes too long from the Microsoft side. I don't know it, but for sure, I will always check the catalog if it's there, because if we don't care any longer about the catalog, then we will come back to the Windows Server 2016 storage spaces direct times. Maybe you remember this, where we had many talks to customers that said, oh, we had not so good experience with storage spaces direct because something didn't work there. And when we got deeper into the discussion, we realized something with the hardware was wrong configured. So I'm pretty sure that this Lenovo solution is great. I had to look at it and I really like the solution, but I think it's important to ensure that we keep the catalog as the reference where we look at, and if a system is in the catalog, then it's fine. And if not, we should wait till it's listed there. Yeah.
Okay. So at the Hannover Messe, we've seen this lightweight device from Lenovo. This one is a heavyweight. So it's packed full with GPUs. It's extremely fast, so supporting any type of AI consumption, what I read so far. It's a project they did in collaboration with AMD. Yeah, interesting. So maybe someone from Lenovo will spend some time in one of my YouTube formats in the next couple of weeks presenting this device. But always good to see that something is happening in the segment of Azure Stack HCI on the hardware side as well, and not only from the software perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, because this is important. We need the hardware. It's the hardware where all the workloads are running on. And I think this could be an interesting combination, this new Premier solution device combined with the SE30 devices we have seen in the previous blog post, to have this as a central device that makes, for example, the AI inferencing and so on. And the small devices are delivering this to the to the production area, to the store areas in branch sites and so on. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So then on that website, of course, we have other OEMs, and we are switching to Dell. So yesterday I received an internal email as well, a lot of internal emails talking about Dell solution, Apex Cloud Platform for Azure with Dell Power Flex. So the interesting thing is that I received a lot of questions from partners and customers the last couple of days. Is this something that is changing the concept of Azure Stack HCI? Because Azure Stack HCI is a hyper-converged infrastructure, and a hyper-converged infrastructure includes network, compute, and storage in standard industry hardware. There's no external storage. Everything is internal. And if I looked at the white paper, I make it a little bit bigger, you can see that there's something different. So they add external storage to Azure Stack HCI. So what's happening here, Manfred? Am I wrong when I say Azure Stack HCI is HCI including storage into the standard hardware? Or is this something that's new for Azure Stack HCI and I missed it?
No, this is not new for Azure Stack HCI. So when we look at the situation today, Azure Stack HCI 23H2 is the latest version. We are in April 2024. Then we have the situation Azure Stack HCI is always an HCI solution. It's always internal storage in the server nodes from the Microsoft design perspective. So if we want to add capacity to an Azure Stack HCI cluster, when we don't look at the Dell picture here, we want to add capacity to an Azure Stack HCI cluster, we will add nodes, server nodes, and with the additional server nodes, we will add CPU capacity, we will add memory, and we will add storage capacity. So it's not possible to add only storage, except I have 3 slots in the servers. Let's imagine we have a 2-node cluster and I have in each server 10 free slots. I can add disk drives, so NVMEs, SSDs, hard disk drives, whatever I'm using to increase the capacity. But if they are fully equipped, I have to add server nodes. And it seems that sometimes customers are asking of only adding capacity to this environment. If we have this information when we are planning for an Azure Stack HCI cluster, we can build a 2-tier configuration. This also exists with Microsoft. In this 2-tier configuration, we have one cluster that provides Azure Stack HCI with nodes with many cores and a lot of memory and nearly no storage. And a second cluster that provides nodes with a few cores, with only a minimum amount of memory and a huge storage capacity. And if I have this 2-tier concept, I can decide if I add a compute node, this is on the first layer, so I increase the compute capacity. And on the second layer, if I add nodes, I increase the storage capacity. But if I want to do this with the Microsoft concept, I have to decide for this way already in the planning. Only a very few customers do this. Most customers say, this is HCI, so it's clear to me if I add a node, I add compute, memory, and storage capacity.
Okay.
And it seems that many customers are asking for, oh, maybe can I add later storage capacity? I didn't plan for it. I don't have this 2-tier concept, which is also possible with Azure Stack HCI. I have a new requirement. I want to add storage. And this is what Dell tried or does with this solution here. I'm not deep in the technique, but I talked to Kenny Lowe from Dell a few weeks ago, and you also had a session with him where I assume you already talked a little bit about this solution. And he explained to me that this is completely Dell specific. So what we see here in this picture on the right-hand side, this has nothing about the Microsoft HCI technologies in there. It's, let's say, a Dell unique solution. They don't communicate publicly what they use in detail in there. Seems to be a very powerful, cool technique, but they add storage capacity via an individual interface. So it's nothing that is in Azure Stack HCI. We cannot use this with another hardware. We cannot use this with another storage component. This is exclusive for this specific solution, and I cannot explain in detail because Kenny didn't talk publicly about it, how this interface works. This is an individual Dell development. I assume this is the SDC, this storage device connector, or how it's called. We can see in the picture here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you have any questions about that, you can go on my website in the hardware services segment and you will find Elmar Süch. And here are his contact information. You can reach out to him via LinkedIn, email, or phone. And I'm pretty sure that he's happy to explain to you exactly what the solution does. And he's the expert. It's nothing about Azure Stack HCI alone. It's Dell technology as a kind of add-on. So please reach out to him and then you will get all your questions answered, I guess.
Yeah, and this does not change the situation in Azure Stack HCI that Microsoft says there's no SAN supported, there's no RAID controller in the nodes, and so on. So this is a part of the Dell Premier solution. And as you know, in this Premier solution, Dell is also responsible for the full support. So they added something and they are saying, we are caring about that it works. And so this should be fine for the customer, but it does not change the architecture of Azure Stack HCI.
Okay. So now we are done with all the official things. Now we are coming to the Q&A session. If you have some questions, so please ask them now. I have a question
Yeah.
to start the conversation. Hopefully it's not too boring for everyone watching us now, but I had a customer call yesterday and they asked the attending experts about what is the better choice for Azure Stack HCI, to have a three-way mirror or to go with dual parity. And this is something I'm not really aware of what this means or what the difference is. So I'm very familiar with the concept of two-way or three-way mirror. And I try to read all the documents about single or dual parity, but I was not 100% sure, is this an alternative to mirroring or is this something that's built on top of it? And what are the benefits?
Yeah. So the important thing is that in Azure Stack HCI and the technology that is used, storage spaces direct, it's always dual parity, because traditional storage systems often use parity, and this means that I only have a single redundancy. So if in a single parity configuration, one drive fails, I cannot survive another failure. In dual parity, this is fine. If I have a dual parity configuration and one drive fails, a second drive can fail without any data loss. And I searched for the documentation, and I have it here if we want to switch on my screen. In the learn.microsoft.com, we have an explanation of single parity with the warning I explained, you shouldn't do this, and Azure Stack HCI does not use the single parity. And we have the dual parity. The dual parity says, okay, I have some data and I have two parity bits that can be used. If I lose a data part, I can recreate it with the parity information. The advantage of parity and dual parity is the usable capacity, because if we have a mirror, we have the situation we write data twice or three times. Your customer compared with the three-way mirror. So if I have 60 terabytes of capacity, I can use 20 terabyte because every data is written three times. I think we explained it in one of the previous shows. Azure Stack HCI writes extents, and each extents is 256 megabytes in size. So you can think about, this is 256 megabytes. So the A here is 256, this is 256, this also, and this is two parity parts for this area here. So regarding the capacity, dual parity is a great thing because it's much better than a three-way mirror. You can start with the three-way mirror when you have three or more nodes, and the efficiency is much higher with the dual parity. But at the end, the important thing is, what are the costs for the solution? And if my storage efficiency is not so good, let's see if there is a picture for the three-way mirror. Yeah, in the three-way mirror, my disadvantage is if I write 256 megabytes, it is written three times. So here I can see if I have 1 terabyte of data, I will need 3 terabytes of physical storage. But to calculate a parity, we need CPU resources. And when we go for the dual parity, we need additional cores to be able to calculate the parity. So when we look at this and we have the situation that we need, for example, in each node, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 additional cores for creating the parity, then we will realize it's cheaper to invest in more capacity and use a three-way mirror than using the dual parity and go for the dual parity situation with additional cores, because the additional cores, I have to pay for the hardware and I have to pay for the Azure Stack HCI fee. So when we look at the data, the customer maybe wants to use dual parity, but if you do a real calculation, then three-way mirror is better and it's much faster than the dual parity. So Microsoft recommends for running virtual machine workloads to always use mirroring, and only for more or less static data like we have in backup storage and so on, we should use dual parity. I would never use dual parity for VM, for running VM workloads. There's a special configuration here that is called the mirror accelerated parity. This is a combination of mirroring. So I could say 30% of my capacity is a three-way mirror, and the rest is a dual parity. And then we have the situation that storage spaces direct provides an automated storage tiering. So my running workload will stay in the mirror area, and the cold data will be moved to the dual parity area. This can work if you do an absolute perfect planning. But again, when you look at the costs for the planning, for the sizing and so on, it's cheaper to add additional drives, to have some more NVMEs in there, increase the capacity and go for three-way mirror. So hopefully the customer yesterday decided for three-way mirror.
Well, they only wanted to know if there's any preference, and yes, we recommended three-way mirror.
Three-way mirror, yeah.
There's a question about the performance. Is it acceptable with dual parity? I guess it depends on the CPU.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have NVMe-based storage, if you have fast CPUs, this can provide an acceptable performance, but on the same configuration, the three-way mirror is always faster.
Okay. There's another question. So Frederick wants to run an HCI sandbox on a two-node switchless device for demo, but stuck on deploying. Any idea what the reason could be?
So I deployed a solution for our tour that started this week. Last weekend, I didn't have any issues. My recommendation is always to start with a virtual machine. So the question to Frederick is if he tried the workflow of Azure Stack HCI deployment in a single virtual machine. So to ensure that all the steps work, that you are familiar with the single steps. So I would always recommend start with a single virtual machine, then continue with a dual node virtual machine configuration, then start with a single node physical machine that is certified. You have the AX nodes, so this is fine. So with a single machine, and then continue with a two-node physical machine configuration, because in the two-node, you have the networking part. When you go into the deployment, you see where the deployment fails, and you have details about this on the right-hand side. So we would need the details about the part where the deployment fails and about the error message. So what I'm wondering about, what do you mean with a sandbox? Because if you are deploying on the AX nodes, you are deploying on physical hardware. So maybe you can specify this a little bit. If you want, feel free to send me a mail at manfred@manfredhelber.de, and I will look at the error in detail. So I deployed a lot of Azure Stack HCI 23H2 clusters, and the typical errors are based on the network configuration. So I think that the typical error messages we have here, for sure you can try to post it, but I'm afraid that is too long for the chat area we have here on YouTube.
Okay, so maybe some more questions are coming, and in the meantime, I want to give an outlook what's coming next. Because the next Azure Stack HCI show, we are not sure when it will be, because in 2 weeks there is a bridge day between public holiday and weekend, and Manfred told me he has a conflicting event, so it looks like in 2 weeks we will not be back again. In 4 weeks, Manfred has on vacation. And so it looks like that we will be back in 6 weeks, but maybe there are alternative options where we can meet, maybe in the Azure Stack HCI show or any other format. There are a lot of opportunities, of course, but in the meantime, if you want to know a little bit more about Azure Stack HCI, I would like to recommend an event I got aware of this morning, because this is the first worldwide Microsoft and Intel Azure Stack HCI event. It's an online event. It's Pacific Standard Time. So in German time, for example, this is 4 p.m. No, it's 2 p.m. to no, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. I guess. Yeah. And yeah, it's an interesting event where you can get some insights from our engineering team, my Microsoft colleagues, marketing team, about market trends, opportunities, some technical fundamentals, how to sell Azure Stack HCI, and some wrap-up next steps. So this event is prior built, so I don't think there will be a lot of announcements, but it could be a good fundamental training for Azure Stack HCI. And at the end, there's an opportunity to raise questions to people like Cosmos Darwin or my colleague Dion. So yeah, if you want to attend this meeting, of course, you can type in this URL. Or another option is to watch our LinkedIn channels, because I will post this event on LinkedIn as well. So in the meantime, there was another question. We are a Dell partner, Frederick wrote, so we have a sponsor cluster. Okay. Done a few virtual machines, but stuck here. Okay, so this is only a comment on the question Manfred had. So I promised to show the URL of my website if you're interested in getting all the news we talked about today, or the hardware services, or licensing content, or videos, white papers. This is the URL.
And I assume there's also my contact information on this page. So if Frederick wants to send a screenshot of the position, I assume that is a network issue, because if you were successful in deploying virtual machines and now it does not work on the physical configuration, it depends if you have switches, if it's direct connected, what your network configuration is, which network card is in the system. And I assume an issue there. This is the most possible thing. And if you send a screenshot, it's possible in a mail, then I can have a detailed look at it. Yeah.
Exactly. So on my website, on individual support, when you scroll down a little bit, you find Manfred, his LinkedIn, email, and so on. And on that website, you get my contact information as well. So maybe it makes sense for you to bookmark this website. Everything I have about Azure Stack HCI is on that website as well. Okay, then it makes sense to follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So Manfred has his channels on YouTube and LinkedIn. I have mine as well. And I have a community called the Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk. It's on LinkedIn, it's on YouTube. So if you go on LinkedIn and follow us on Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk, you will not miss anything about this great technology. Then, of course, it makes sense to watch the hybrid show every second week, always before the Azure Stack HCI show. So if you want to have more content about hybrid, not only about Azure Stack HCI, then Manfred and Eric are providing this. Of course, there's the on-premises show with Carsten Rachfal and the ARC show with my colleague Alexander Orta. So a lot of shows Manfred is doing, a lot of opportunities to stay connected. And if you do not want to miss anything, so it makes sense to use the Windows Business Solution Club calendar. You can put all the things into your individual calendar, and the way how to do that is documented on manfredhelber.de/calendar. But it makes a lot of sense to use the WBSC email newsletter as well. Manfred is sending this newsletter once or twice a week with all the cool things he's doing on manfredhelber.de/newsletter. You can register for that newsletter as well. So one more thing from Frederick.
Yeah, and I've a first tip for Frederick. He's also expecting maybe it's the network, and he mentions the BCM, so the hardware-based management interface. It's the Dell iDRAC, and in the iDRAC configuration, there's an option where you can provide this network interface card to the operating system to be able to connect to the hardware interface even if you have no network cable in it. And this provides an NDIS network interface card to the operating system. This NDIS network interface card is not compatible with Azure Stack HCI, and this is for all vendors. So this is not Dell specific. So maybe this is enabled in your configuration. I didn't see the error message. You mentioned you will send this to me, then we will see this. But maybe this is a first thing where you could have a look at if this is enabled. It's not relevant if iDRAC is on a separate network. The situation is how iDRAC is configured. And if this NDIS is provided to the OS, this NDIS interface, then this will not work. So you have to disable the shared usage. Yeah. But maybe it's also an issue on the other network interface cards you mentioned. Yeah.
Perfect. So now it's time to say goodbye, to wish you a nice weekend. Looks like in Germany, spring is coming back. It was very cold the last days. It snowed sometime, but now it will be warm again, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Manfred. Thank you to everyone watching the session, and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.